Hello and welcome back to my RC channel. I'm Andy RC and today I'm going to be taking a look at the all-new Emax Babyhawk R Pro 4-inch edition. Emax really have now got all of the sizes covered, from tiny whoops to fully fledged 5-inch racers and freestyle models. This is a 4-inch racer and it's a size that doesn't get much of a look in these days. But one of my favourite models is the 4-inch Vifly X150, so let's see how this one compares. Vifly essentially put 3-inch components on a 4-inch frame, and that did work. It's a really fast model, and you can get it down to the 250 gram mark if you use a small enough LiPo. I think, if I recall though, when I did a punch-out line of sight with it, there was a small delay in acceleration as the props spooled up to speed, and that's down to the lack of torque from the smaller motors trying to turn a heavier prop. So Emax have sort of done a similar thing, except these motors are 1606 3300 kV, and this size stator has been used on 3-inch models in the past. The 3B kit that I built on the channel some time ago used 1606 stator motors, but I found them to be overkill on 3-inch, and in speedruns I was getting diminishing returns against other models that had 1506 stator motors at a similar kV, and I thought to myself 1606 would be much better suited to a 4-inch model, so we can see if that is the case today. The props are a 4-inch version of the 4028 Scimitar, which is quite a low value, but it's not always an indication of how the model will actually perform, so I'll have to see how it flies. Without a battery, it weighs 166 grams, so with a 650 mAh 4S LiPo, it comes in at 248 grams, which is under the magic 250 gram figure. Interestingly though, this model comes with a LiPo, which is a 850 mAh 4S ATC, and that gives an all-up weight of 263 grams. So I think with this guy they are saying for the ultimate experience it's going to be above 250 grams, albeit still extremely lightweight for a 4-inch model, or you can go sub 250 grams with a smaller battery, with the forfeit being shorter flight times and possibly more voltage sag. 4-inch is also on the cusp of needing an XT60 connector with these specs, but an XT60 is heavier, so again I'll have to see how it performs with this XT30. The canopy looks identical to the 2.5-inch Babyhawk R Pro, however the frame is totally different. The original has a unibody and this one has the front two and back arms linked as a pair together. This is actually a spare that they provide in the box, which I'm always a fan of, and you can see that it's got a decal similar to that of the Buzz, but it's a slightly different pattern. And those bolt between two sandwich plates, which are carbon fibre and 2mm thick, and the arms are also carbon fibre and are 3mm thick. Then we have a high quality battery strap and a silicon mat, which is ticking all of the right boxes. The only thing I've had to change is the strap's position. It originally threaded through this hole here, which leaves the LiPo kind of dangling because there's not enough room at the top for the LiPo to sit. So I've rerouted the strap through the side of the model, which will mean the LiPo will sit flat properly, albeit on its side. Now, to be fair, I did complain about the quality of the LiPo strap on their last Babyhawk Pro model. The quality of this one is great, but it's just a little bit too long for these LiPos. Anyways, onto the stack, and it's Emax's own Mini Magnum 2, consisting of a 20x20 35 amp BL Hali 32 4-in-1 ESC, which is capable of a 2 to 6S voltage. This one, of course, though, is limited to 4S by the motors. It looks like the ESC board has been mounted upside down, as we've got two Rubicon 35 volt 100 microfarad low ESR capacitors, which usually face upwards on this stack. And it looks like they've changed the ESC's board orientation as well, so that things are less exposed in a crash. I think in doing so, they would have had to remap some of the resources, which is not a bad thing because with this guy, I'll have Emax's setup on there and you'll be able to download the CLI off their website if the setup gets lost somehow. But it does kind of restrict you tinkering with it yourself because you will have to remap those resources to get the motors recognized as the right number. Above the ESCs, we have an F4 flight controller with Maytech F405 as the target. It's come flash with Betaflight version 4, although I'm told by the time this model is released, it will come with Betaflight version 4.04. This flight controller has got 5 UARTs in total. Apparently it was something people were complaining about on the previous version. So yes, you've got 5 UARTs, although one is taken up by the receiver and another for TBS smart audio, and the third one is taken up by runcam control. So yes, you can control the FPV camera settings through the on-screen display right out of the box. And then that leaves you with a further 2 UARTs spare to do as you please. So this opens the model up to more receiver options and modifications. As for other things in the setup, I noticed I don't think the ESCs give telemetry out because it wasn't set up on a UART, and the ESC protocol is set to DShot 600. Now I think technically DShot 1200 should work with them being 32-bit, but I'm going to go with Emax here and stick with their stock settings as much as I can. A must change for me is the arming angle. At stock it is set at 25 degrees, but I've set this to 180 degrees. The PID loop frequency is set to 8K. I did adjust the warning voltage to how I like it, but I didn't touch the scaling. It looks like they've put a custom value in there for the current meter. PID profile 1 is tuned for their included 850 mA 4S LiPo, as well as the rate profile 1, so I've left all of that the same. The receiver tab is set up as TAER1234 and the RSSI is enabled on the auxiliary 5, and I kind of had a eureka moment at this point because the Emax Buzz models all had the RSSI on the AUX 5 but came with an XM Plus, and that has no option for RSSI on an AUX 5. However, the receiver that comes with the Babyhawk R4-inch is their own D8 receiver, which does output its RSSI to the auxiliary 5, so that can be kept in. I also think I added some RC deadband in there as well. I don't think that was stock. The modes tab was set up exactly how I like it on my Tyrannus. I wonder if I'm starting to have some kind of influence on them. So auxiliary 1 is for arming, then auxiliary 2 is being set up for angle and then acro and air. Auxiliary 3 is set up for a lost model alarm, and auxiliary 4 is set up for turtle mode. So there is nothing to change there. As for the on-screen display, like the Buzz, I removed the average cell voltage and added the main battery voltage. That's just my preference. I also put my VTX channel on there for when I'm flying with others. I turned the warnings off as well. Above the flight controller, we have a switching VTX from pit mode up to 200 milliwatt, but it comes locked to 25 milliwatt out of the box, and some of the channels are limited in that mode. So to unlock it, first of all, you might want to undo the 1.5mm hex screw at the back, which will then lift the canopy up like the back of a car. The reason I say this is because you can't get to the VTX button at all, or the receiver's bind button, so you can sort them both out at the same time. If you want to unlock the VTX, you have to press the button on the VTX while powering on the model, and the display should show U for unlocked and AL for locked if you want to reverse it. The receiver doesn't power from the USB, so you'll want to bind it at this point as well. And again, it is hold down the bind button while powering on the model, and you need to set your transmitter to D8 mode. Both receiver and VTX have a linear antenna which poke out of the back of the canopy. You will probably want to add the included cable tie to that, otherwise I can see them meeting the props at some point. The VTX antenna is using an MMCX connector, so I'm a big fan of that. And to get the best results from a linear antenna, I'll link to my goggles, antennas, and diversity system in the description below. Lastly is the old Cadex Turbo S1, which is actually a CCD camera, and they have rebranded it Emax. And left in the box are 2 full sets of the scimitar props, along with a bag of spares. You get some stickers, the Cadex manual, as well as a small Emax manual that should be able to get you in the air, but seeing as this is a Betaflight model, it's always worth having that knowledge to get you going with Betaflight. Okay, let's go for a line of sight with this guy. This is with the supplied 850 milliamp 4S LiPo, and I'm just in angle mode for the moment. This is really just to see what it sounds like, see if I can hear any oscillations, and see what the punch is like. Plenty of punch, but I think I did hear a little bit of voltage sag there. Let's try again. Yeah, definitely hearing the RPMs decrease. Let's try acro. So it could be the case that the C rating isn't quite enough, either that or it's the XT30. But that's in a punch out, of course. If you were racing with this guy, you wouldn't be always on full throttle. But that's my first impressions. Not hearing any oscillations, it's a very quiet model. You see with the quick blasts, no noise at all. Yeah, seems to be behaving line of sight. Okay, let's bring it in. This next one is a 650 milliamp GMB 4S. So let's see what the punch is like with this guy. I think it's got even more punch. I'm hearing less voltage sag as well. Let's try again. No, still hearing voltage sag. Not too bad though, but I'd expect a short flight time on this guy. But it does send it under 250 grams. Next we have some DVR footage taken from an FPV flight, done with the included 850 milliamp 4S LiPo. I'm going to do a speed run because there's no people around. Let's see what it does. So that's 92 mile per hour, but you can hear the RPMs tail off and the voltage sag to 13 volts. If you also look back, I think its peak amp draw was about 84 amps. And as I was saying earlier, I think this model could do with an XT60. The most I've ever seen go through an XT30 connector is about 87 amps, and it was just like this. It very quickly tailed off after that. So let's check out again. So going down to around about 67 amps, something like that, and we've got a slower speed, but opposite direction, 91 mile per hour. It doesn't always pick that up because it's just a small dot appearing very quickly, but yeah, it was a crosswind here, so that shows, yeah, top speed about 90 mile per hour with this guy, 90 to 92 mile per hour. But other than that, the video is really clean. You can see again just some slight wobbles there. Could be the wind, but it'd be interesting to see how this guy flies on the 404 CLI that they have come out with. but it flies super smooth when you are not on full throttle. So this is what I'm thinking, yeah, it could be the conditions, because yeah, there is definitely the signature Emax super smooth when doing freestyle maneuvers. And the included LiPo is actually pretty good. I thought, I wonder if I use one of my higher C Tattoo R-line batteries, whether it will perform any better, and it didn't. You'll see that flight in a moment. In fact, those LiPos have been a little bit more abused than this, so this is its like first run. Let's take a look. So still about 90 miles per hour. Take a look at the RSSI value though, very low throughout the entire flight, so you want to make sure this guy doesn't get away from you more than 100 meters, because, you know, close to myself here, even though I'm behind myself like 60s, but then you can see I hear the voltage sag and it's dropping down to the 40s and 30s, and that's when you might start to get a failsafe. You can see though the voltage has recovered 14.6, so pretty decent battery I think with this one. I'm just under a 3-minute flight time, but I'm actually landing early here. This next flight was done with the Tattoo R-Line 850 milliamp 4S, so it's actually 10 grams heavier than the supplied 850 milliamp, so it's 95C, but they are spent. And if we look, we got it flashing at 12 volts and at 90 miles per hour. I actually don't think it made it any higher than 80 amps on the current meter as well. So yeah, I think this battery is a little bit spent. What I did notice though is we are getting similar top speeds and there's less of a wobble this time. Still a little bit there, but I think the heavier battery is actually helping the PIDs. So I would say that it's potentially the PIDs giving that slight wobble at the top of the throttle. But as I say, they sent this to me with Betaflight version 4, but their CLI will be 404. So it's kind of a prototype model, what I have got here, but it will give you an idea of how it is going to fly, because it's flying super smooth for freestyle, and 90 miles per hour, not the fastest model out there, of course, but still pretty quick. The model just feels really floaty, and yeah, it's a almost freestyle kind of feeling rather than a race copter. And I think if you don't give it full throttle to do these speed runs, then you can get a 4-minute flight time easy with an 850 milliamp 4S LiPo. And I have to say, rather than racing around, this guy was a lot more fun just doing aerobatics and maneuvers, which is my favorite thing to do. Yeah, the current meter really accurate though, so that's something that is going to be useful when testing batteries and things like that in the future. So it pretty much landed at 850 milliamp, so we can go by the current draw as well. So 20 amps just on a punch out there as I dive this tree. But yeah, what I did notice is if you don't go heavy on the throttle and stay pretty low on the throttle, then you get a decent flight time, and it's got loads of low-end grunts, so you don't need to go up on the throttle. So if you just stay pretty low like this, I mean, you can see 90 miles per hour there and into the 13s, but you can see the voltage recovers, and it's recovered to almost 15 volts. So yeah, I guess you could say it's heavy on the amps if you are giving it loads of throttle, but if you are just doing short punch outs and doing freestyle, then it's a good model for that. It's an interesting one though. I would recommend it, but there are a lot of models on the market. All I will say about Emax is you will get the service and you'll get the setup. They give these models to pilots, so they get tuned properly. Even though you saw earlier I changed a few things in the setup, you don't really need to change any of those things at all and the model will fly. So I think that is what you are buying into when it comes to Emax. It's removing all of the bother of setting Betaflight up from scratch and coming up with your own PID values. And of course the forfeit is that you are flying someone else's ideal setup and not your own, which is why I sort of say, look, if you are buying a model that has got Betaflight on there, then you're going to want to learn Betaflight. But look, we are coming up to a 4-minute flight, even with a couple of punch outs, so I don't have a link at the making of this video, but when there is one, I will link to it in the below if you wish to get one. I also don't know how much this model costs, so you will have to click the link in the description to find that out. This video has taken about 4 days to make, so if you can afford to do so, I'll link to my Patreon in the below. And as always, thanks so much for watching. Please continue to subscribe. Cheers.